I don't know why I like it. I just always have.
This is a conscious effort on our part to open the creative envelope, so to speak, in order to entertain you in a more contemporary manner. Even though we call ourselves sports entertainment because of the athleticism involved, the key word in that phrase is entertainment.
Vince McMahon has lost his mind. The man doesn't have it anymore.
We in the WWF think that you, the audience, are quite frankly tired of having your intelligence insulted.
Have you watched the television show lately?
We also think that you're tired of the same old simplistic theory of good guys versus bad guys. Therefore, we've embarked upon a far more innovative and contemporary creative campaign that is far more invigorating and extemporaneous than ever before.
Because while Doink the Clown had a green hair and a rubber nose, Stone Cold Steve Austin was drinking his first beer in ECW, damn you. Oh, we got attitude. You got nothing, man.
As the times have changed, so have we.
Welcome back to Beyond the Beermat, the podcast that stayed up all throughout the night to watch Wrestlemania and then just basically went, yeah, we're not going to bother recording anything for a couple of weeks because everyone else will get the reaction and the immediate hot takes. We're tired, we'll go to bed. One day we'll wake up, go to the pub, drink, and manage to talk about wrestling once more. Which is now, basically. My name is Stuart Quigley, alongside me is...
Alright, it's Matt.
And before we get into the main topic for discussion today, obviously we've left it late. We've literally arrived at the arena, pretty much not quite as bedazzled and as amazing an entrance as Charlotte, and like everyone else is in there, and she's like, oh man, I was so late, this is disgraceful. This is how we've left it, but we don't get the heralded entrance.
We get a patter of applause.
Oh yeah, we definitely
walk in the doors.
Yeah.
Oh, pause, yes.
Well no, basically what I think happened is, and it's interesting that when that entrance happened, the cameras cut away just as Charlotte was walking up. I would have liked to have seen the cameras follow her through the arena, to which she goes up to the arena and the guy goes, you got a ticket? And then she's not got a ticket.
Glorious.
So she's not allowed in, and she's out in the cold, wearing a robe and effectively her underwear.
Like a bikini?
Effectively, yeah. She's got the women's title around her waist a little, so that covers more of the body than most, but it's not the best attire for New York at that time of year, especially when you hear all the stories about how many people were stranded following that event finishing.
I'm thinking about her getting changed in a travel lodge. Like getting all tarted up, doing her makeup, just wearing her bikini.
Do you reckon, like,
and
basically
for the helicopter? What the fuck is it?
Do you reckon it was a case of, like, she was getting changed and then she realised she was going to be late for WrestleMania, she decided to call the helicopter? Or was the helicopter already on standby? Like, fuck this. Even she couldn't be asked with 90% of WrestleMania.
It's like Uber, Stu. All the posh rich people have it. Just book yourself a helicopter at the last minute.
Fluba with the helicopter.
Alright, Uber, I've got a wrestling match. Do you mind sending the helicopter? Yes.
Uber doesn't respond to you. But admittedly, in podcast form, you can't do the Uber response of just a notification on your phone. So that's fine. That's fair. But admittedly, yes, we are late. So what's happened is the immediate aftermath, which is the Raw and SmackDown after, and also last week, the superstar amazing shake-up, which has achieved the sum total of fuck all.
Guff.
Yes.
Absolute fluff. A load of old shit.
Yeah. So as a way of getting ourselves back into the swing of things, I'm going to ask you, is there anything you could think of, be it a move, and I do actually think Roman Reigns' SmackDown is pretty intense, but is there anything you could think of that would actually shake things up, or is it just literally a case of like, we're same cycle, different day?
I am shaken up.
Are you?
I'm shoken.
You're shoken?
I'm shoken, Matt.
Ah.
There's no Hardy. Nothing. I'm shoken, Stu, by the departure, by the beloved loss of Luke Harper, who has decided to jack his hand in after a miserable WrestleMania performance, and given the fact that his former Basham brother, or whatever his name was, what are they called? Sledgehammer dudes.
What were they called? That's bad, that. They weren't even, this isn't like 10 years ago.
Eric Rowan, the ginger one.
Bludgeon Brothers, yes! Got there in the end.
Well done.
Yes.
Sounds like a Super Mario character.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Ironically enough, Hammer Bros were.
Were they?
You remember them turtle heads that lobbed the hammers? They were called the Hammer Brothers?
Alright, we're kids.
I believe so.
There's a lot of brothers.
Yeah.
It's a big old clan.
I don't know what the mating rituals of turtles are like, but I suspect it's like quite a lot.
So yeah, a bit of a shame that Luke Harper's gone.
This, I think, is sort of
Wasted.
touching quite subtly into the topic we're going to discuss on the main stage, as it were, in terms of like, are a lot of people actually looking for their releases in the last sort of 6 months? And is it a sort of peek behind the curtain, as it were, in terms of it's not necessarily a happy atmosphere back there? This is what I mean about shaking things up, because evidently people aren't happy.
Yeah, people are already shaken up.
Yeah.
They don't need this on their mind as well. I think it's just an overfilled roster, Stuart. I think you've got too many people, too many men. You've got too many men. You've only got 3 hours on a Monday night and 2 hours on a Tuesday. Plus all this McMahon jabbering that goes on.
3 hours and 2 hours.
Yeah, and all this boring shit skits and unfunny guff that's there as well. And so it's just got too many people, haven't you? Too many performers. Not everyone's going to get time.
And the other thing as well is leaving the Fed isn't as a devastating career move as it used to be. It's actually a viable career move these days.
Only just. You don't get paid that much to be an independent wrestler.
I think
Say those 3 magic initials that are going to roll me up, Stu. Say it.
AEW.
For fuck's sake. Get a grip of yourself.
I am. I literally was having a grip of myself as I was imagining Cody Rhodes with his amazing belt, wife, and the dog that follows him around, which is more over than half the WWE roster.
Let's just put the AEW on the old back burner.
Oh, the podcast for another day, definitely.
Yeah,
but what I mean is that if you're looking at this from a long-term booking standpoint for your actual life, leaving WWE, even so much as like, I'd say 10 years ago was, oh God, how do I get back to
Yeah, why
here?
would you do that?
Yeah.
You're making the big bucks, just stay put and bide your time. And
Whereas now, if you're a jobber,
place.
you've got as much of a chance of going up the card as you have of staying there working hard, but it's easier and it plays into the ego of certain people that you can go elsewhere, be a big guy, and probably get more of a push when you come back.
Yeah, I think there was talk a few years ago now about old Dolph doing it.
He should have. He so should have.
The problem is though, I think the issue lies in, it will come down to the conversation about like storyline and having the right person to fit the storyline, and whether or not it's the storyline or the performer that makes the overall performance. But say you had someone like, let's go with Ziggler. It's probably not the best example, but we'll go with Ziggler. If Ziggler left the Fed a couple of years back when he was in that sort of rut, even if he went now, if Ziggler went to the indie scene, I think he'd be a draw for a couple of matches at a smaller federation. If he then went to Ring of Honor or New Japan, again, I think he'd be a draw for a couple of matches.
A limited time?
Yeah, I think you're only on borrowed time when you're doing that anyway. And the problem with the person like Ziggler is, in Ziggler's position, you're not going to lower yourself that far. You're not going to be working the old cliche bingo halls, are you? You're still going to be going to a major promotion, but you're only going to be good for a couple of matches. It's the same instance with Jericho.
But I think a schedule like Jericho's is all you need. You don't have to make the contract with AEW. You can do a one-off appearance at Ring of Honor, maybe 2, like where one's a promo, the other's a match, and then have your New Japan sort of extravaganza, and then that's enough to get you back in with the federation.
Yeah, but that's not. Is that giving you enough time to actually make that impact? Like, if we go back a few years, so we're going to go back before AEW. We're going to use Chris Jericho as a prime example, where he was fighting Kenny Omega, and it was Alpha versus Omega, and all of this. If Chris Jericho was a mid-carder and he went and did that, I still think he would have made a splash. Probably because he looks different to a Japanese audience, hence the reason for Kenny Omega's success anyway.
Well, the fundamental reasoning and definition of a dream match is just a match you didn't think you'd see. So even something like Dolph Ziggler versus Kenny Omega, I'm sort of nonplussed on it, but it does fit the certain criteria because you're not likely to see it.
Right, here's another one then. Let's use Zack Ryder. If Zack Ryder went to a large non-WWE promotion, would he make an impact?
No.
Why not?
Not immediately.
So he's sticking with it for a few years then?
I
I don't think, even if he does stick with this promotion for a few years, that's when he's not getting that initial sort of
Yeah, I think
that
for
bang, is he?
something like Zack Ryder, it's a difficult one actually because he has been in certain high-profile things, but the overall consensus of him is that he's lower than the mid-cards, and it's interesting enough actually that he's not quite a mid-carder and has had nothing going into WrestleMania for quite some time, obviously, but has still had a WrestleMania moment, like in the last couple of years. Like when he won the IC title, I know he lost it the next day, but still a WrestleMania moment, and then winning the tag team titles. It's a weird way of getting those accolades, if you want to call it that, getting those feel-good instances.
Yeah, but that's because he's like the perennial underdog, isn't
Yes.
he? That's the way he's painted to be. So
I think my point was, you looked at the work that he did when he got himself over, and the age-old adage is if you can get yourself over in one promotion, you can get yourself over anywhere. And the added advantage of that is if you can get yourself over in WWE, that you could definitely get yourself over anywhere. So he would be able to do it. But what you said about the instant sort of flex of Zack Ryder versus fuck knows who's TNA World Champion these days, like it wouldn't get my heart racing in any sort of way. But what he could do in a couple of years, you look at the people that have gone to Impact Wrestling, or TNA as it was, I just mentioned, and there are some fucking really high profile guys, and for one reason or another, mostly the booking, it just never really went anywhere. And then a guy like Matt Hardy, of all people, makes himself a, oh my god, must see character in this show. So it's doable, you just have to put the work in.
I've got another example for you then.
Okay,
This is
cool.
the first spanner in the works. The nephew of Dixie Carter, EC the Third.
Oh god.
Poor old EC3, who he was world champion in TNA, surely. Yeah, of course he was. Oh man, I know nothing about wrestling.
It was in between one of Alberto Del Rio's like 15 reigns, I think.
Yeah, so EC3 was a major star in TNA. Well, let's go back even further. Do you remember his name in NXT?
Derek Bateman.
Well done. Then to TNA, where he knocked about, and then he finally came out of being, he came out being the nephew of Dixie Carter, and then back to WWE, a rival company, that's going to piss off the family at Christmas, getting buried, doing nothing. So, at the height, at the pinnacle of his career in TNA, which is really bad to say, if he went to an indie promotion, he would have made an impact, surely.
He would have made more of an impact going at the height of his TNA fame than that.
The problem is, though, would Vince have buried him still the way he has if he'd come from an independent scene or TNA?
See, I thought, and we did actually do a podcast about this back in the day, where the idea of EC3 / Derek Bateman being a WWE guy to start with would have actually benefited him in the long run and would have made Vince not look at him like that. I don't even necessarily think that it's the case right now. Like, it's, oh, he's a TNA guy, so he's not getting the push. There's questionable booking made all over the show at this point. I think the most damning statement of them all is the fact of kind of what I just alluded to, which is he'd actually been better off in TNA. How many people could you have said that about in the entire history of wrestling? Like, you would be better off.
in TNA.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a toughie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I can name anyone. Actually, I can. Tell a lie.
I think there is another one.
I'm going to say James Storm.
Yeah. Brady
I
Walker.
don't want to go through the entire TNA roster,
No.
but I do have another one to mention just quickly.
Cool.
The Golden Boy, the future face of the WWE, Mr. Scotland himself, Drew McIntyre.
I don't know.
He was there. He was a bright young stud.
Drew McIntyre's an interesting one because he's again got that sort of career arc of starts off, has that initial push because he's a big bastard, goes nowhere because, as most things they try to force down people's throats, it's not accepted, gets released, gets a bit of a buzz on the indies, but not in TNA. He got a bit of a buzz for the work he did here, basically, and cutting promos that you would not expect this guy to be capable of, and I think a lot of that, I really don't want to use the phrase borrowed time, but a lot of the sort of leeway I'm giving him right now is because I know he's capable of this, whereas before I didn't. But what I would say is, you can't tell me that a guy that fought Roman fucking Reigns at WrestleMania is in a poor spot.
No, he's in a fairly decent position. The problem with Drew McIntyre is, though, the old accent.
Yeah.
Them foreign bastards.
It's very
Insta-hill.
It's very different cutting a promo over here, because you could, even though the political divide is rather large in Britain and the UK and England as it is right now,
Sure.
but you can still sort of get over with that, because we sort of hear that accent more often than, like, it's not unfamiliar to us, it's really unfamiliar to them, and that might hurt him in the long run. But I don't think a guy like that size should necessarily be talking that much anyway.
Them lovely, lovely, tasty steroids. So
He's not
nourish.
former three-man band member Jinder Mahal, but he is a former three-man band member. By the way, the point I was quickly alluding to, by the way, it's a massive tangent that we got onto. The shake-up that I was proposing in my head to really put the hashtag cat amongst the pigeons, and I'm not talking about Ernest Miller, I would have moved Brock Lesnar to SmackDown.
Didn't he do any UFC against someone?
Either way, just at least announce it. What's he going to do? Not turn up? He wasn't turning up anyway.
Why would you put him there, though? To face Roman Reigns again?
Well, I wouldn't have moved Reigns. Reigns is a good show, but...
Right.
Well, I think Brock Lesnar is the kind of guy to move to SmackDown that just makes you go, hang on. Without him having a match, it suddenly changes the concept of a Brock Lesnar match from, oh, we're going to get the same old bullshit again, to, oh, we're definitely getting something different, both in terms of matches, because obviously different people, and just the landscape of what would be, A, SmackDown now that he's there, and B, what will be left of Raw, with obviously like Roman Reigns to just claim the top. And I don't necessarily think, and the cynic in me would suggest, because I've already heard this rumoured for SummerSlam this year, they're probably going to go back to Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar again at some point. They love that. It's
Sooner
like
or later, it's got to hit the mark.
it's like Cena Orton, but infinitely worse, which is impressive actually, given how like awful Cena Orton is. But
if you keep throwing shit against a wall, Stu, eventually something will stick.
But I think the thing is that like with Lesnar going to SmackDown, it at least makes how you build toward that slightly more interesting.
I think the problem with Reigns going over to SmackDown is, what's he do? What are we having?
He's got good chemistry with Daniel Bryan. He's got good chemistry with,
But we've
ironically
seen
enough,
that's what everyone hopes for, and I hoped I'd be happy, a bit more jovial, a bit more of a positive wrestling fan coming out of WrestleMania, which was a tremendous show by all accounts, given the fact that I've watched it 3 times now.
Jeez. That's 3 more times than Vince McMahon.
Man, that's 7 hours each time as well. Still haven't watched the pre-show though, so fuck knows what happened there. Anyway, what I'm getting at is the superstar shakedown, whatever it is.
Shake weight, yeah.
Yeah, but it's trying to add something which isn't really necessary. It's trying to ride the wave of WrestleMania still, and it's trying to keep the casuals that are on board for WrestleMania for another week. But sooner or later, the cynic in all of us has to go. Guess what? When it's not WrestleMania season, it's a big old steaming pile of nothingness in it. It's a big old flop. And so, do we want to see Roman Reigns versus Daniel Bryan again? Are we going to get the storyline of the New Day turning their, Xavier Wood and Big E turning their back on Kofi Kingston? Or is Roman Reigns going to interject and we're going to have Roman Reigns versus Kofi Kingston, who, let's be honest, I know people argue that it's not about the size of the fight and the dog, it's about the dog in the fight, or the other way around, all that bollocks. If Vince McMahon has any say, which I'd imagine he still does, the belt's going straight on Reigns.
Yeah.
It's not staying on Kofi Kingston. That whole sort of the build-up, the underdog, the big dream for Kofi Kingston to win the belt finally after all these years. The first opportunity is going on Roman Reigns.
Okay then, I think this is a perfect point to leap onto almost cruiserweight-like the big talking point that we're going to go through for this podcast, which is WrestleMania was awash with success stories from a kayfabe fan-face perspective. The people that we wanted to win won across the board. First of all, that's very unusual. Very
kind, very nice of them to do that. Yeah.
I mean, they're so used to like spit in our faces and tell us it's raining. It's unbelievable. Here's the question I'll ask first of all. Are you going to look back at that WrestleMania with more fondness because of this? Or are you just going to look back and go, ooh, maybe it caused a bit more problems down the line? Because I do feel like giving the fans what they want in this moment in time, all the way, like, okay, when you watch WrestleMania, you're expecting a little bit of leeway. You're going, okay, there's fucking 3,000 matches. I expect at least half of them to go not necessarily the way I want them to go.
We were talking about it when the event was on. What we were saying, let's be honest, if Seth Rollins wins the belt, Kofi Kingston ain't going to win the belt. If they both win the belts, so Kofi wins, Seth Rollins wins, Becky Lynch ain't going to win the belt. Either way, you need to keep that sort of level of anticipation and the desire from the fans almost, don't you? You want to keep that. You want to give them something to keep tuning into. So I know where you're coming from. Should they have pulled the trigger in terms of giving the fans the happy ending, the happy ending for every single match when they do have rivals on the horizon that are going to be shaking things up? What are we tuning into for the next few months and like in the lead up to SummerSlam? What are we going to see? We're going to see basically the fan favourites lose the belt, and then we're going to do it all over again where they might win the belt at SummerSlam or they're going to lose the belt at SummerSlam.
Well, this is the thing, when you have a wave of
positivity.
Oh, that was perfect. In this way, then that means, and again, maybe this is the cynic in me to believe that there is a wave of negativity coming, and I think you've got to be very careful, because certainly with two of those three stories that were being told at WrestleMania, Seth Rollins, Brock Lesnar being the odd one out, is that in the story Kofi kind of had to win, because if Roman Reigns wins the title on even the next pay-per-view, that doesn't matter. It hasn't changed that story. It hasn't stopped that moment. Maybe slightly sours it for like going on, but
of course it will sour.
No, but I don't think you'll be looking at that. I don't think you'll be looking at Kofi winning the title in 3-4 years' time and going, yeah, that was great, but he lost it like the following month.
No, you're not going to remember it, but you don't remember like the shitty P-papers.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. When you put yourself in a situation, which WWE kind of did, and sometimes the story to tell is the obvious story to tell, which in Kofi Kingston's case it was definitely true, because he wasn't even in pay-per-view matches, like going into, I think, Elimination Chamber. He only got in because of an injury, and then the wave just sort of carried him forward. And Becky Lynch, sort of a similar deal in the sense that the story you were telling only realistically going to end one way. Now, the other thing you've got in that instance is, I think there's more at play there with how you could have sent the fans home happy, how you could have really destroyed the fans' confidence, especially with it being the main event. But with it being the main event, you want to send the fans home even more happy than they've already been. And it's funny how you look back at what was a monolithic WrestleMania with more sort of rose-tinted glasses for Kofi Kingston's moment than Becky Lynch's, because Becky Lynch's comes at the end of it all.
I disagree.
Really?
Yeah, man. I think being I don't want to blow smoke up the Fed's ass or anything, but one, being the main event of WrestleMania, being the first ever women's main event, that's going to be seen as a historic thing for years to come. Every Hall of Fame thing you ever see ever again will feature that match.
I'm not talking about them though, I'm talking about you yourself. When you were watching Kofi Kingston win the title, and I've got to be honest with you, we can get onto this more now, my personal emotions during that pay-per-view, slightly more for Kofi than for Becky, even though I wanted them both to win by the exact same degree.
The Kofi Kingston match didn't really have much riding on it for me.
Okay.
I wasn't too concerned. I'd have kept the belt on Daniel Bryan.
I think you could have. I think there's a way to do it.
There was a hell of a way to do it, and you'd have made Eric Rowan look fucking glorious in the process as well. You would have given him a hell of a push. Let him turn on Daniel Bryan later on down the line. Give him a bit of a career rather than Luke Harper and him, and giving him nothing.
So
Daniel Bryan's now not going to show up. Daniel Bryan doesn't hold the belt, so he's now not going to show up on SmackDown for the next 4 weeks, month, maybe after. But either way, what have you done? You've taken the belt off Daniel Bryan. Yes, Kofi Kingston's had his moment in the sun. He's had his WrestleMania moment. That's the correct way of phrasing it, I guess. But either way, he's going to lose the belt in a couple of months. It's going to be a sort of, well, you've had your moment. You're none the bloody wiser. You're still going to be looked at as a B-class citizen.
Okay, can I just... all right, Vince, I'm about to get into that. Can I ask you a question then, in terms of... And again, you may disagree. Kofi Kingston's win is a big moment, whereas the women's match main eventing is the moment in and itself. It's not necessarily who won.
No, I wouldn't have thought so. I think that match...
Becky was the right one to win, wholeheartedly. But I just think simply them going out there, simply them having the match, was the important bit. Whereas with Kofi, it was him winning that was the important bit.
I think it's always dangerous, like we alluded to earlier on, in putting belts on faces in the first place. Mm-hmm. It's always going to be an uphill struggle for the writers and the creative team if you put the belt on a face. As everyone said, if you've ever read any wrestling autobiography, it's harder to be a face than it is to be a heel.
Because a face isn't allowed to look dumb or stupid or have anything that detracts from them as nothing but 100% clean cut. A heel can have everything happen to them, and then in the ring, as long as they cheat, they've got the heat back.
Yeah.
If a face like, I don't know, was in the ring and a heel ran out and like gave him a beer bath or something, you'd probably just cheer the heel. You wouldn't give a fuck. You wouldn't be like, I need justice for this face. You would just think, what a chump.
Maybe I'm wrong in what I'm saying though, in terms of because the creative team aren't actually that clever, that's why we've got so many tweeners. That's why we're still booing Roman Reigns when, after everything he's been through. Even during his match with Drew McIntyre, I was going to say Drew Gulak then, cruiserweight, even during that match, he was getting booed. Apart from the fact that the crowd were dead for the most of it, the better part of it.
Well, I think that goes more into the realms of what should and shouldn't be on WrestleMania and how you carve that turkey out, if you want to call it that.
Positioning in the card.
Definitely that. And also, they didn't really give us a reason to care.
We should have cared. Should have cared a lot more.
Yeah, but they didn't, as dumb as it sounds, and it's like, I feel like I'm giving WWE too much sort of, or wrestling in general even, just any promotion, too much credence in this. Oh, you have to tell us why we need to care when the reason to care is obvious, but you need to underline it and underline it and underline it again. Because, I mean, there was, in my head, some sort of wacky scenario where Dean Ambrose would have fought Roman Reigns at WrestleMania just as a way of like, his goodbye. And you would have cared more about that.
Yeah, of course. But then if you're doing that, then you'd probably put the Seth Rollins match on later on in the card, wouldn't you? So it completely changes the whole face of WrestleMania.
Well, funny enough, you've heard about the thing about the Hogan had no idea
that Heyman was coming out.
Yeah.
Hence the reason Heyman walks out to Hogan's music, and it's glorious because it's in time. Like he's walking to the beat, and it's like, yes.
But okay, going back to the main topic of discussion then, making the fans happy across the board. You, after WrestleMania, had some certain comments about fans, full stop, and I do think that being, I don't know if it's because I'm getting older, I really don't.
No, it's because we're British, Stu. That's what it is. It's because we're British. I'll tell you what's annoying me about fans. When I get a train in the morning to go to work, maybe I will slip on WWE Uncaged 4 or WWE Uncaged 6, and I might listen to the sultry sounds of Mark Henry's music, or I might listen to... Exactly. Or, I hate to say it out loud, I once listened to Randy Orton's music and quite enjoyed it.
I'll give you a flashback of, there was once a dark period in my life when I was the only boy in a in a A-level maths class, and if you're like outnumbered something like 30-1 in a class, you better be fucking good at that class. Sadly I was not, and I would listen to regularly WWF Anthology on a CD player, because that's how old I am.
Oh, lovely.
Yes, and whenever Billy and Chuck's theme would come on, I would just remember like raising a smile and thinking, thank fuck no one could hear me listening to this.
So, in the privacy of your own home, or maths lesson in your case, perfectly fine. What sort of annoys me, and maybe it shouldn't annoy me, maybe it's just me, but it makes my fucking skin crawl when I see fans that aren't at the event dance to wrestling music. So, if you happen to be in an establishment that is playing a pay-per-view, and there's a lot of drunk people around you, when they dance and chant and sing as though it's going to make a difference, it really pisses me off. I don't know what it is. It's just cringy.
Two things here, right? Number one, first of all,
don't talk about real sport.
I'm going to in a second, but
I know.
not just yet.
I can see it in your eyes.
Yeah. There is a point where, and I do know what you mean, whereby I was in the exact same drinking establishment as you, watching the exact same WrestleMania 35 as you, and I was watching these people, and I was not very happy with them. But at the same time, is it just wrestling fans being happy? Which is kind of what we're talking about.
I know, and
they shouldn't make a difference.
this is
really.
me. This is now on me, because you shouldn't get pissed off if someone else is having fun. And there's no reason to. There's absolutely no reason to be annoyed by someone else that's happy or having fun. But my mentality, and I'm going to say it again, it's the British mentality. Happy people.
I'm with you.
Piss me off.
I'm with you. But the other thing that I want to throw at you before, obviously, the real sport argument comes at you, which you know is coming, because it's sort of all in one. Because I'm going to do this like a seamless William Regal versus Eddie Guerrero style transition.
Oh, lovely.
Indeed.
Smooth.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. Atmosphere makes things better. Shit matches can seem like better matches because there's a better atmosphere. Whether it be live or whether you be in a room full of people, maybe the strangers, watching an event. And the better atmosphere, the better the match.
Sure.
So, in terms of real sport, that obviously counts as like just football chanting, whatever. And people do that when they're in a pub, and people do that not as a way to help the team if you were there in person, but again, it makes for a better atmosphere in theory.
Yeah, in theory, indeed. Maybe it's just those knobheads that were stood a bit too close to us that annoyed me then. Look, I understand that. I think it's probably the sort of predetermined element. There were many moons ago. I'm going to spin you a yarn now, Stu.
Oh, hello.
So come sit a bit closer to the thigh. Yeah. Take your socks off, maybe. Cuddle up on the rug. I'm going to spin you a yarn. Many moons ago, there was a young boy called Matt, and I was at home. And I was watching Manchester United play Bayern Munich in a Champions League final. And I was a rather excitable and impressionable young lad, let's say. And I seemed to think that the harder I cheered, or the harder I could throw my socks up in the air, would make a difference to how Man United performed in that game.
Obviously, you threw your socks really high.
Would you believe it?
Yeah.
Fuck me, they've only gone and scored twice, haven't they? And Man United won. Now, I've seen you in many an establishment, watching Liverpool, getting a bit carried away with maybe 1 or 2 pints, and it's made a better atmosphere for me. All right, it's made it a more enjoyable atmosphere at least, because I know, well, one, if Liverpool do really badly, you're going to be pissed off, so I can laugh about that. And if Liverpool win, you're going to be happy. So happy days all round. So either way, it's a win-win situation watching you watch your beloved Liverpool play a game of soccer. The thing is, if we were to be watching a wrestling match, and I saw you doing that, I'd tell you to calm the fuck down and sit down and stop making so much bloody noise, because it's predetermined, you dumb cunt. So, can't say the magic word on the podcast.
It's staying in. Okay, can I just...
It doesn't make a difference if you cheer for Kofi Kingston.
Yeah, okay, but there is another point to be made in terms of... This is both devil's advocate and whether the opposite of devil's advocate is like angel's advocate, which is crowds don't chant at wrestling to make the atmosphere better. They chant to make themselves feel better. They chant, and again, I know for a fact I'm tarring everyone with the same brush.
Foley, calm down.
But there's a massive element, especially in 2019, of they're doing it to get themselves over rather, and we're guilty of this. Like, we go to wrestling and independent shows in and around the West Midlands, and we're not sitting there when perhaps a tag team are in the ring and we enjoy their theme music and we enjoy their aesthetic and probably nothing more than the theme music really, but still, we're not chanting for them to win, but we still chant, and in itself it contributes to the atmosphere. We've also been in a venue where someone has been with us and has reacted in the same way you would to football, and we both did look at that fella and go, you're right, you need to calm down a bit. Followed by what I believe was a 20-second long Tipton chant.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Tremendous.
Indeed.
Glorious.
Yeah.
Alright, well, fucking hell, now I'm going back on the argument. Maybe I'm just annoyed by people getting too carried away. When Shinsuke Nakamura comes out to his music, which you can't dance to anymore because you don't know the fucking words because they're in Japanese, but previously, when he was coming up at Full Sail University, what I don't want to see, it annoys me when I'm sat, I'm watching it, is people in the crowd, in the front row, doing bloody hand movements and dancing like they're tripping out because they've heard a bit of music.
Here's a question for you.
Makes me cringe, man.
As a throwback, this is an impressive leap actually, given the fact that we were just talking about ourselves going to indie shows, but again, I'll go back to the very first episode of this series and this podcast. If we can't put ourselves over, we may as well just not bother. We have been to a WrestleMania where we have been carried away with a particular chant and a particular hand movement.
You have to remind me, Stu.
We had a wank in the toilets.
Ah, tremendous. Alright. A glorious load was shed by all.
Yeah.
Alright, maybe it's the atmosphere then. Maybe it's me being a miserable old bastard.
There's a huge element of cynicism in there, and I do feel like what I found, and I really have to, I can't put this on the fans, I can't put this on the Fed, I can't put this on the wrestlers, I can't put this on the storylines, I have to, and I can only put this on them, that after WrestleMania 35, I am just a cynical bastard, and I don't feel like it, because when I watch it, I give it more sort of leeway than most.
Maybe that's why I've watched it so many times. Maybe they've achieved
Are you looking
their job.
for that?
It makes me feel happy. But then, at the same time, re-watching it a few too many times, aka more than once, it makes me happy because of the memories of what we got up to that night.
Yeah, even though it weren't much.
Yeah, that makes it sound rather saucy though, doesn't it?
We're wanking the toilets again.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. WrestleMania, and it's not just WrestleMania. I don't even think it's sports. I think it's, again, I think this is far too deep for a wrestling podcast that just sits and has a few beers, but still, the point still stands. Stories have always been a part of the human experience, and stories and myths and legends, and which is kind of what wrestling is sort of the modern day equivalent of, if you want to really extrapolate a long way. But it's because you have a shared experience. When you've got your one fella around the fucking campfire, like old Captain Caveman, who's actually able to communicate an A to B storyline or whatever, like, that's the same sort of thing as fucking Daniel Bryan and Kofi Kingston, but just with a whole heap of fucking history laced upon that. And throughout the entire course of human evolution, throughout the entire course of history, it's just literally, there's a reason why they say that every story's been told, because that's all we've done. And it's not necessarily how good the story is, it's you remember where you were when you first heard whatever story it was. You remember being or feeling a certain emotion when you heard that story, when you saw that story. And I don't mean like fairy tales or like old children's books. This could be films, this could be, I don't know, old plays if you're that way inclined. And again, definitely sport and wrestling. And that might be the grandest fucking climax. Hello, that's going back to wanking in the toilet. Let's talk about going from highbrow to lowbrow. I talked about the transition, Eddie Guerrero, William Regal style. That was the perfect transition to the finish of this podcast. We have been beyond the Beermat. We have been talking about a WrestleMania in which everyone went home happy, and we actually enjoyed it.
Endings.
Yeah,
yes.
well, yeah, that's fine. Like, we actually enjoyed it, and the cynicism is still there lurking at the back of our minds in terms of like what is going to happen. But as long as everyone's happy, and if you listen to this podcast, you definitely will be. That's all that matters. Thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.